Hey, Nina here. You are officially listening to Triggered. Can we play with that wherever you get your podcasts? Although today we have a very special episode. I recently worked with Coach Lee Hopkins of Patterns of Possibility right on Instagram. And I appeared in their social summit series. I was the keynote speaker. And so what we are going to be doing today is I am going to give you a little bit of some nuggets before and a little bit of some nuggets after the actual keynote speech that I gave there. We are going to take a cut, right? The excerpt that I spoke, and we are going to rebroadcast it here. I will warn you now, if you are watching on YouTube, the quality is not quite what you are seeing right now. And if you are listening via podcast, the audio might be a little bit different than the luscious, warm tones that you are hearing from me now as I use my favorite microphone, friends. But I digress. What is this episode going to be about? Keep listening if you are wanting to explore your triggers around breakups and loss. Specifically, the tool that I'm going to be exploring with you is Rupture and Repair. It is a mindset shift on seeing all types of breakups, all types of loss, right, as moments of rupture between either yourself and yourself or yourself and someone else. And in most cases, it's usually both, right? So with that said, if you are open to exploring rupture and repair and how you can, yes, my friends, prompt your own healing with your own tools, then this is going to be the episode for you. So without further ado, grab your journals or a really good friend to dialogue with about what comes up for you in this episode. Y'all know we do not, right? It would be impossible to cover every facet, right, of information when it comes to rupture and repair, but we are going to be covering at least one facet. I'm going to be sharing some stories. I break it down into chapters. And if for some reason you are listening and you are like, I feel like I'm missing something, we will have the YouTube link also in the show notes so that you can see the visuals on it if needed. Other than that, again, grab the journals, grab the friends. Understand we are about to play with some triggering things potentially. And for now, what? You know I'm curious. Are you ready to play?
Welcome to Triggered. Can we play with that? You know that moment when your emotions ramp up in an instant, leaving you feeling helpless, frozen, or out of control? In that moment, you've been emotionally hijacked, the very definition of triggered. And I want to ask you, can we play with that? I'm Nina L. Garcia, drama therapist and empowerment coach of Houston Creative Arts Therapy. Join me as we discover ways to empower you and the people who mean the most to you to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. Triggered. Real playful, real respectful, real empowered.
So before we get into the actual episode, I always start with let's take a breath. Taking a breath is a fantastic way to be able to check back in and reground and reconnect with yourself. So anytime that you feel you are unraveling out into the ether, take a breath in and reground yourself, recenter yourself. Yes, yes. Okay. So the skill that we are really exploring today, it really, write this down right here, is based on the quote, the idea, the concept of this. Rupture is inevitable, period. Repair is possible, period. That is the main idea of this episode, and that I want you to start taking with you. A lot of us have something dramatic or traumatic happen in our lives. And what ends up happening is we say, I've got to avoid that. That's too much. That's overwhelming. I don't have the skills for that. And far be it from me to tell you whether that is exactly what you need or not. But my friend, what I do know, I want to say beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that if you are ignoring or avoiding, that it probably needs to be more temporary than permanent. The reason being, that truth, that dramatic or traumatic thing that occurred, it still exists, even if you don't want it to, even if you don't pay attention to it, even if you ignore it or avoid it. That dramatic or traumatic thing still exists. An uncomfortable truth is still a truth. And so when I tell you again, rupture is inevitable, I want us to start thinking about and accepting the reality. You cannot have a perfect life, no matter how much planning you do. You can have an ideal life, you can have a good life, but perfection does not exist. Yeah, it doesn't exist. And so again, coming to this mindset shift of rupture is inevitable, we say at some point, of course, something will attempt to throw me off course. Something will cause a rupture, either between myself and myself or myself and someone else. And you know what? I know, mindset shift number 2, that repair is possible. And in fact, repair is possible whether I repair with that other individual or just repair the relationship with myself. Repair is possible. But there is a third part to this that I'm going to talk about in the video, and it is that if it's not obvious already, that repair is optional. So when I say to you that rupture is inevitable and repair is possible, my next statement to you is choose wisely, because it is always optional. With that said, and without further ado, I will let you launch into the episode. You are going to hear Coach Lee Hopkins introduce me, and then I will launch into an explanation of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, how I'm inviting you to explore and play with triggers around this. And this is 100% the time, if you haven't yet gotten out that journal, to pull it out so that you can start taking all the little things that actually stand out to you, and you can put them down on the page, right? Whatever works for you, you put it down on the page. We're also going to talk about, at the very top of the video, creating a culture of consent. So I am going to let the video take over for that, and I will be back after this excerpt from the Breakup and Loss Summit.
Here we go. Nina L. Garcia is a licensed professional counselor, registered drama therapist, and certified clinical trauma professional. Wow, isn't that awesome? Like, drama therapist. We've got drama, like TNT, we know drama. Nina is passionate about creatively supporting people to redefine their relationship to trauma, emotional drama, and intersectional identity. While specializing in trauma, Nina has a unique interest in empowering people with mixed identities and diverse narratives to heal from traumatic invalidation. So we'd met because I had been a guest on her podcast where we talked about some of those things as a trans man, as a Black trans man. As a private practice owner, empowerment consultant, and the host of Triggered, Can We Play With That? This awesome podcast that is Carrie's second favorite. Nina is proud to empower people of all walks of life to own their truth without oppressing themselves and without oppressing others. Let's give it up. Nina! Hey. Welcome.
Lee, thank you for such an introduction. So yes, I think two of the things that I'm going to pull out of that before I even get going are, I am very relationally driven. So you are going to hear me invite you to explore your relationship to not just yourself, not just other people, but also your drama, your trauma, your emotions, your grief, right? Your relationship to these bits. So that's one thing, right? And the other thing you might have noticed is that I am naturally very expressive in nature. This serves me well, yes, when I am speaking, but this is how I am 98% of the time. Okay? So this is not a performance. This is me giving you what I've got and the best of it. So that said, we are going to be launching into 30 minutes of what I have prepared for you. If at any point you need to stretch or stand up or move yourself around, I invite you to do so. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to think anything about it. If you need a drink or a snack, you take care of yourself. Yes, because I'm not there. I don't know what you need, but I trust that you do. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay. So take care of yourself as we explore this territory. The other thing that I like to invite before I begin, because I do have a New York state of mind, and so sometimes how I speak, feel free to have a journal on hand to write down any questions or points that pop up for you if you're a notes person. Oh, I love it. There it is, Connie.
I already got it.
Whatever works for you. And if you're like, nope, I'm an auditory listener, I've got to stay here with you, then wunderbar, we'll be going into it. Questions, comments, or concerns before we start? Okay, let's do this thing. Let's go ahead and take a breath in. All right. So yes, I am a drama therapist. Yes, I am a licensed professional counselor. But what I really love to invite people to start to think about is how to empower themselves. And I don't mean empower yourself in the way that I think is very much the popular way of like, let's just empower ourselves and like, let's do the things we want to do and live the life we want to live. I think that's beautiful, just so we're clear. But I also think that there is a difference that we are missing between powered and empowered. And sometimes we are actually talking about a powered way of engaging, which means that we are still willing to minimize, misrepresent, or outright reject ourselves or other people. That's still a powered way of engaging. And then there is an empowered way of engaging, which says we can have different truths, different experiences, and different understandings of things. And I do not need to minimize, misrepresent, or outright reject you or me because of that difference. You with me? Okay. So as we move forward, already everyone has spoken about these beautifully diverse ways, right? These multifaceted ways of exploring breakups, loss, grief, bereavement, right? And what I want to invite you to explore is an empowered way of looking at what I will be referring to as rupture and repair. So for breaks, loss, bereavement, everything we're thinking under that is a rupture. That is how I will be referring to this, is the rupture. Do we recognize the rupture? Can we see the rupture? What's our relationship to the rupture? Yeah. Before I launch into really exploring this idea, I want to invite a culture of consent. Everything that I share with you, I want you to imagine, is on a table between you and I. Even if it sounds like she's telling me it's for sure, she's telling me this is a fact, I'm telling you, offering on that table, you get to pick it up and look at it. If you love it and it vibes with you and it resonates with you, you can run with it. If you picked it up and looked at it and you're like, it's about this and that really should. Fantastic. Put it on the shelf. We can look at it, right? You can get some time to explore that. If it doesn't work for you after you've picked it up, you throw it in the trash, you burn it, whatever it is, if it doesn't work for you, right? I am here to offer you from my lived experience as a human being, and it is an offering on the table. You can consent to take it, modify it, or completely trash it, whatever works best for you, okay? So we're gonna take that breath in there. Culture of consent. And we move forward, okay. So this relational lens that I'm speaking of, for me, I have found it to be very healing. It is something that I offer to other people because I think it helps give us perspective. It's very easy when something has happened, it feels like it's right here, and it's very difficult to see everything else because it's so close to us. And when I say, what's your relationship to that? It invites us to just sort of be like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I have distance between this thing and this thing? You mean there's some space between this and this? And I say, yes, there is. We don't exist in a vacuum. It's just a fact, we don't. And so when we talk, as we move forward about ruptures, I want us to think about it as self and other. That's the relationship. The relationship we have to ourself is the primary one. And then the relationship to other, we explore secondary. There are many reasons for this, but I just want us to say, for the sake of this conversation, that's how this is going to roll. So here we go. The invitation to explore this idea of rupture and repair. It works in 3 parts, essentially. The first part is that rupture is inevitable. That would definitely be something to write down. Rupture is inevitable. It is predictable. We cannot get away from it. You cannot always predict when the rupture will happen or what the rupture will be, but that a rupture will occur is inevitable. And so that is our first idea, that rupture is inevitable. And we are going to be looking at this again through the relationship to the self, then the relationship to other, and then we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but then you would look at your relationship to the world at large, right? The beyond just you and the people around you, what's happening. That's the first idea. The second idea that we'll move into is after rupture is inevitable, repair is possible. That's a true statement. Repair is possible, period. The third bit that we will be going into is that repair is optional, period. It is not mandatory that you repair with yourself or anyone else, and it is not mandatory that someone else repair with you. And this can cause a lot of strife and a lot of struggle, especially if you have an expectation and you really think, come on, if we could just repair this, we could both move forward. Alas, repair is possible, but it is also optional. And so as we explore these 3 chapters, I'm going to walk us through a story that is my personal story. I'm going to use my story as an example to walk us through rupture and repair. And of course, it is my story. And again, you take what works for you and you leave what doesn't. But here we move on to chapter 1. Rupture is inevitable. With the ruptures that have happened in my life, I think about divorce. I've been through divorce. I'm a mother of 1. So then I had to realize, okay, well, not only was the divorce a rupture, but now my idea of how I could show up as a mother and a family means I don't get to have a whole family in the house anymore. Now I have to figure out how to be a single mom. I never planned to be a single mom. What does that say about me as a mother? Right? Then I had to learn how to deal with that, the grief around being a partner and not having that anymore. The loss of my grandmother, who had early onset Alzheimer's. She died in her 60s, early 60s. And what a blessing it was when she left, because she was in so much pain and struggle. But how to sit with that? Being in front of my grandfather as he died, I saw him leave this world, being able to process through that. I have experienced a variety of forms of assault, including rape, not limited to that, as well as sexual abuse. And I stand here in front of you today, and I can say that I have worked on repairing every single one of these moments. Because the one thing that has come up consistently in everybody's story is, if you are not taking care of yourself, how can anything else follow, right? And so, rupture is inevitable. And the story that I actually want us to explore and focus on, that I'm going to offer, is the story of the teacher when I was in high school who abused me for my sophomore year. Nobody knew about it. And when it first happened, I didn't know what was happening. I literally did not understand what is occurring right now. I don't understand why this teacher's on top of me. I don't understand any of that, right? Take a breath in, everyone. I did not understand what was happening. And I did not know that that rupture was going to last for at least the next 12 years as what I would then come to call post-traumatic stress disorder. That rupture lasted 12 years because of the repair process that I had capacity for, that I knew about, and that I did not know about. And I will explain more about what I mean in this. So this rupture was inevitable. I didn't know it was going to happen, and yet there it was. The first relationship that I want us to think about is your relationship with yourself. The moment that this occurred, this rupture, my relationship with myself immediately became, I had to blame myself. How could I have let this happen, right? A lot of shame and guilt. Mimi, you should have seen this coming. How did you not know this was going to happen? As if I was a fortune teller, like I should have been a fortune teller, right? How did you not know that this was right? And you blame yourself. I felt blame, I felt guilt, I felt shame. I was angry that this person had done this, but I was more angry that I had let it happen, as if I had chosen this, which, just so we're clear, was not the case at any way, shape, or form. My relationship with myself had a huge rupture. It affected the way I saw myself. It affected, now we're going to move to self, other, and the world, right? The relationship levels that are there. It affected the way that I saw teachers. It affected the way that I saw adults. It affected the way that I saw romantic relationships. I wanted to retch for the next year when I saw other people engaging in any kind of intimacy. It affected my relationship with safety. I couldn't be safe anymore anywhere in the world because I was not safe internally. This makes sense, this rupture? It's not just the one moment. It's the ripple effect of what happens past this rupture. And so when we think about how this rupture was handled, the school covered it up. Eventually they found out about it and the school covered it up. The teacher who abused me lied about it. He said that I was feeling suicidal and that he was coming to my rescue and aid, and that's what had happened. Yes, created a huge story, right? To which I denied. I said, absolutely not. That is not what happened at all. They were let go of their position. There was no other action taken. And it turned out with this rupture, and that this is the way it was handled, many, many years later, we discover that it was happening to so many more students than me. Nobody did anything about it. So that the rupture is inevitable and that the harm has been done, fact, we can't change that. The harm is done. But as we move into the potential for repair, this question now becomes, just with the characters that are in this moment in this story, whose responsibility is it to repair? Is it my responsibility? Is it my abuser's responsibility? Was it the school's responsibility? Whose responsibility is it to make this repair? Now, with the many ruptures that have occurred in this, what I want to invite, because I prioritize the individual in my work of empowerment, is when it comes to the rupture that I had with myself, with my own thoughts, with my own feelings, with my own behaviors, with how I experienced the world, there was no one else to be responsible for those things. No one else could change those things. I had to do those things. No one has access to my thoughts and feelings and behaviors. Can they affect me? Yes. Can they offer me things? Sure. If I don't have capacity to hear it, at the end of the day, who is in charge of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? Nobody else can be responsible for it except me. And this is sometimes a very difficult truth for people. And so what ends up happening, sometimes we avoid that. And we say, no, I need to blame the school, blame the abuser, blame the, right, this, all of this outside of us that we really don't have any control over. But we blame everyone else. But then what that allows us to do is actually avoid potential repair. So when we think about this question of repair is possible and who can be responsible for that, my invitation as we move into chapter 2 is, what if I could be responsible for that repair? And what would that even look like? So we'll take a breath in here. Check in with yourself. If there's any parts of your body that are needing patting out or wiping down or shaking out. Emotion is energy that must be expressed. If you don't express it, it will express you. And you may not like how it expresses you. So we're going to put you in control of what you can control. This makes sense? Okay. Another wonderful tool right there to be able to check in with yourself. I don't urgently need to get to the rest of the speech. I don't urgently need to tell you the story. I actually just need to be. I need to check in. And then when we're ready, we can move forward. Chapter 2, repair is possible. There were many attempts to repair that I had for myself. I recognized that something was off. That very first year, if I'm honest, I don't remember much. One of the ways that my body attempted to protect me was through what's called dissociative amnesia. I do not remember a lot of that year. My brain said, wow, this is really overwhelming and traumatic. Let's just take that away from you. I could not remember the first moment of how the abuse had even begun until many, many moons had passed. I'm talking years. And I was like, oh my God, it just came to me one day through my repair process. My brain said, oh, we're probably ready for this now. This is how it began. It wasn't because of something you did at all. And then this added to my repair process. So when I think about the attempts to repair, there's an attempt to repair with myself potentially, right? Once you begin to think about the characters of the story, I could have made an attempt to repair with my abuser. I could have made an attempt to repair with the school, right? An attempt to repair with the world at large, right? How did this happen? There are many different ways that I could have attempted to make this repair. And in trying to be responsible just for myself, because if I'm honest, that's all I had capacity for. I was trying to survive for many years, survive. And so I did a lot of personal work, a lot of this is what happened, going over it, right? In a bit at the end, I'm going to offer you a tool on how do we lean into this, right? And I'm going to give you story first. I was thinking, how do I do this? So I did a lot of personal work, a lot of acknowledging to myself, this is what happened. This is what was wrong about it. You need to do this in order to move forward, right? Survival. How can I move forward? How can I make it through this, right? A lot of how I existed was performative at the time. It turns out that masking in performance can help us survive. The challenge is that you want it to be a short-term solution, not something that exists for the rest of your life, right? Your emotions are going to tell you, no, you don't know how to handle this right now. Let us hijack you. Let us, do this for you. And you're going to say, I need some skills. I need some tools. And when I use this, you won't need to hijack me. Right? So I attempted this at the beginning. I did this 6 years after this had occurred. 6 years, folks. I was 15 when it had occurred. I had not reached out to my abuser, but they reached out to me on Facebook. They reached out through a messenger. And yes, and it was, wanted to check in on you. How are you doing? Yes, like they're the victim. Like, oh, I just want to check on you. Blah, blah, blah. This is the mark of an unwell person, just so we're clear, right? How did I respond? Angrily. I was pissed off. It's like, the F are you talking about? You ruined my life. You never apologized. You were twisted. You didn't know what you were doing. You damaged me, right? I put it all out there. What did I hear back? No apologies. No. What did I hear back? Defensiveness and blame. You're the one who ruined my life, said the adult to the child. You're the one who did this. Let me tell you what this actually ended up doing. I did not eat that story that this person was trying to feed me, okay? I did not eat that story. I said, that's not my truth. That's not my story. This is important because you want to know your story when you've had a rupture, because other people are going to try to feed you their story. Don't eat it. Don't eat it. You don't deserve it. And you know what? Don't let them be the victimizer. Don't take that story. So what did I do? I said, oh my gosh, I took a minute. They were blocked eventually after that, right? I took a minute, and what I realized in this moment that actually set me free for a true journey of healing after this was, they are afraid of me. I have seen this wrong. I thought I was the victim, and don't get me wrong, I was victimized. But for 6 years, I thought I was the victim, and I thought, they're afraid of me. I could be seeing this. I could be seeing myself differently in my own story. I am not a victim anymore. I am going to figure out how to really get myself back. And that is what I did. I started getting serious about doing the personal work. I looked into therapy. I looked into counseling. Did I go to therapy and counseling, folks? No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Why didn't I do that? Right? Why don't we do that? This is where you want to look at not just your lived experience of this moment, right? I knew logically this was an option for me, but why didn't I feel behaviorally and emotionally like this was the next step? Because I grew up in a family and in a household and in a society that said, you don't need therapy. What you need is to pull them bootstraps up, do it yourself. You're not weak. You don't need that. I'll tell you what, going to therapy a little sooner would have done for me. It would have left me maybe with only a 6 to 8 year diagnosis of PTSD instead of a 12-year diagnosis, okay? Because it wasn't until I went to therapy that I was able to relieve myself of that diagnosis, okay? I'm gonna talk more about that in a bit. The repairs that I had attempted to make and that we attempt to make, it's not enough just to know what your options are. You have to have capacity and feel safe enough to say, I'm going to choose that as an option, that I am worthy enough to choose that as an option. And also in this case, I knew that therapy was possible, right? This is chapter 2, repair is possible. I knew it was possible, but I also knew it was optional. I had to choose it. And I wasn't choosing it because I was strong and I could do this by myself. And I was doing it by myself. And I was suffering behind the scenes. It was affecting my personal relationships and my ability to view myself. I was hyper aware anytime I went out. I didn't feel safe anywhere. And I at some points could not engage intimately with partners because I still had a trigger that said, we're not safe here. You can't relax enough here. You're not safe in my own body. Partner didn't have to do anything with it. All I had to do was feel intimate touch, and my body said, defense mode, right? It wants to protect me. It wants to protect me at all costs. This is what our bodies do. Sometimes that is overprotecting, and then we cannot connect. So repair is possible. I just didn't take that therapy repair. I kept working on myself. I did not need to repair with the other character in the story. And in some cases in your own stories, you may find repair is possible with the individual in your story. That may be a beneficial thing. In fact, one of the bits that Connie mentioned earlier, and I love what she was saying, I don't know if this is outdated or right, whatever the case may be with the letter writing. I recommend that to my clients all the time, and I've done it myself. Why? Because sometimes the people that we need a repair with are no longer with us. The people we need to repair with are no longer accessible in the way that we might need them to be accessible if we were to have that dialogue. And so I don't want to depend on somebody else's availability or capacity to be with me for my own repair. I am worth more than that. I am worth that repair. We are worth that repair. And so as we wrap the chapter 2, repair is possible. Knowing your options are there doesn't mean you will take them, but knowing that you have options is important, because at some point when you do have capacity, you will be able to see that they are there. And that wraps chapter 2. Take a minute, write down any questions, comments, concerns you have. We're going to take another breath in. Pat out or shake out any emotions that are not benefiting you. Take that breath in and ground as you're able, right? We move into chapter 3. Repair is optional. Repair being optional puts a lot of power in your own hands. It says, wait a minute, you mean I can choose this? Yes, you can choose it. You just have to want it. Yeah, but it's really scary. I don't know if I want to choose that. I hear you, right? When we've been in a particular landscape, it is comfortable to be there because we know what it is like. That's what our brain says. It says, well, we know this is familiar territory. We know how to handle this. You want to go into that unknown landscape over there? You want to risk going into new territory? That sounds dangerous. I don't think we should do that. Sounds too vulnerable. But this is what keeps us stuck then, right? Again, overprotective. One of the ideas that I like to invite people to think about when they say, I know it's an option, Nina, I understand it's optional, but it's too much, it's overwhelming. And here's what I say. I want you to think about this repair as optional like this. Is it dangerous or is it scary? Because there is a difference between scary and dangerous. Dangerous is like saying, you can attempt this repair. Go ahead, just jump off the ship into the shark-infested waters. That is dangerous, okay? It's different than scary. You got to go into a therapy session and you're going to talk about the things that have been dangerous, but are actually no longer dangerous. It's just really freaking terrifying. Scary, we can do. Dangerous needs some more support before we can explore. Right? We need to get stable and safe when things are dangerous versus I need to process this. I need to really feel this. It's just really scary. So if we're at the point where it's no longer dangerous, we say it's just scary, let's make the repair. Let's choose the option. And so if we were to choose the option, in the case of my story, I got into grad school, actually going to be a therapist, and they were like, hey, we really recommend that everybody be in therapy. And I was like, oh, wait, you mean like officially it's a recommendation for me? Like officially? Okay, let's do it. I needed permission. I needed permission for me to be able to say for my own journey that this was like the next best step. I got into therapy and it was the next best step. I knew that I had PTSD. That was not a mystery to me. What I didn't know is that I could gain the tools if I were willing to accept them and learn what they were to no longer have PTSD. The trauma, the drama, the loss, the break, the rupture, I can't change that occurred. We'll never be able to change that occurred. What I changed is my relationship to it. I was no longer beholden to PTSD trying to protect me from what it said was dangerous. I was now aware, oh, wait a minute, there is space between me and this thing. I can change the way I am related to this thing. I no longer need to react in the present to what happened in the past. I can actually use the tools and gain the tools I have to be able to respond in this present moment. There is a difference between reacting, it turns out, and responding in the present moment. I needed tools to be able to make this repair, and I needed to choose the repair. And so one of the questions that I ask myself and that I invite people to ask when they're finally at this point in their process is, what's at the center? What is at the center of your world? Is it, this is what they did to me and I'm going to blame them and it's their fault? Because if that's what's at the center, then that's what's rippling out and affecting the way you see yourself and everyone else. So let's change what's at the center. What if what's at the center is, I deserve to not have to feel this way anymore, or I deserve to be okay with this loss. I deserve to have peace with this loss in my life. I deserve not to carry the weight of everyone else's feelings about this loss. What if that's what's at the center? Oh, then I'm open to tools. I'm open to ways of perceiving and living a different experience that really allows, at the end of the day, me to be at the center of my own story, not the loss, not the break, not the rupture anymore. I deserve to be at the center of my own story. You deserve to be at the center of your own story. So when I ask that, I say, well, who or what, because it can be a what, is at the center of the story. And then who or what then has the power? Are you okay with that thing having the power in your own life, or would you like to be at the center of your own story? And then when we think about rupture is inevitable, repair is possible, repair is optional, and yes, Nina, I want to choose this repair. Well, how intentional are we really being about that repair? The repair to yourself and the different parts of yourself that have experienced this rupture, the repair to others and the potential to repair to them, right? Because just because you want to make that repair doesn't mean they have capacity for the repair. It's an unfortunate truth, but it is a truth nonetheless. And then the world at large, if that's what you need, right? But why do we want to make this repair? Why, if it's not wildly present yet, that you deserve to be at the presence, right? At the center of your own story. If you are not at the center, you cannot show up as your most authentic self. It ain't gonna happen. You have too many other parts of other people's stories, of the shoulds and the this should be this, and flag it. If you are at the center, now we can talk about what feels authentic to you. What feels like your most vibrant self? How do you courageously exist in this world that maybe doesn't understand what you're going through? Maybe they don't know what's going on for you. And yet, how do you still show up for yourself despite that? Because again, that rupture is inevitable. People are not going to understand everything. Repair is possible, and it is optional, and we can choose that. So, as we wrap chapter 3, yes, take that breath in. We are moving into the final moments of me sharing here. I like to, this is a typical thing in my podcast episodes and in my speaking as well. And really in knowing me as a person, like as a human being, I'm really about like growth and like, what's your next step, right? Now, when it is time to make that next step, This is the adventure challenge, because it's not always like, let's go, it's the next thing. Sometimes I need to be like, no, wait, I need space. No, wait, I need to just maintain where I'm at. But when you tell me, okay, Nina, I'm ready for the next step, I say, okay, here's your adventure challenge. Are you ready? I want you to think about your own personal story. I want you to imagine that you have a stage of your own life and that there are many scenes that have come and gone on your stage. And there are many scenes that are presently playing out. And of course, you are the main character in this story. The spotlight should be on you in your story. And when it comes to breakups and loss and ruptures, you are still a part of that story. But if we do not take the time or don't have capacity to take that moment to recognize that it is us at the center, your emotion will hijack you. It will put you out of the spotlight and it'll say, we understand this was a little bit too much for you right now. You're overwhelmed. We'll go ahead and handle life for you. And when you get emotionally hijacked and you are not running your story, this is where people start to talk about, you need to have control over something. You need to be able to keep moving forward in life. So what happens? Then all of a sudden, we can't control the feelings. We're not emotionally sober anymore. So what are we going to do? Okay, well, let me just have a drink. Let me just misuse my medication to help me sleep. Let me just riskily start sleeping with other people. Let me get into an abusive relationship. Do you see what I'm doing here? Drugs, sex, alcohol, it doesn't matter what the dependency bit is to help us cope and survive this moment. It's one thing if this happens one time, right? But the emotion says, if you don't have the skills to deal with me, don't worry, I got your back. I'll make sure we keep using this thing so you can survive. And at some point, it often becomes maladaptive for us. There is no reason that I should have gone 12 years with the resources present and there with PTSD. If I had capacity, if I had the right invitations, and if I had known what was possible, I believe that it could have happened sooner for me. And here's the thing, even though it didn't, I love my life. I love who I am today. I love how I've shown up. I love the repairs that I've made. When something triggers me and it triggers something that is bigger and older than this moment, like when I became pregnant, I got re-triggered. All of a sudden, my trauma came back. I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't want people touching me anymore. That was old stuff. That wasn't stuff from when I was pregnant. What did I do? I said, oh, Nina, that rupture was reopened. Nina, do you recognize that? That's not now. Repair. This is yours to repair. And it did. I paid attention to what my body was telling me, and I made the moves to repair. So as you think about your own life, your own stage, here and now, are you in the spotlight? And if you're scene that is still playing out, a rupture that is in need of repair. You don't have to share that with anyone, but my invitation to you right now is at the very least to acknowledge it to yourself. This is the rupture that is in need of repair, and I am worth that much to acknowledge it to myself. This is the rupture that is in need of repair. And if you're ready to go just one step more, I want you to ask yourself, how would repair be possible to this? And if I had the tools to make this repair, would I be willing to tend to this rupture, to this wound? These are the questions that I want to invite people to start to ask for themselves, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the school that supports you, if you have people telling you stories that aren't true, right? If you're feeling so much shame that you can't, even when years later I had a voice lesson teacher, a new one, ask me, did he sexually assault you and abuse you? I looked at her and I felt the shame. And I said, no, that's not what happened. I knew. I was screaming inside, you're lying. You're lying. I wasn't ready yet. But when we are ready and we keep asking ourselves these questions, and if I had asked myself these questions sooner, I could have been ready. I could have been ready to just say, this is just transparently what's here. This is candidly what's here. So as I move to close, folks, my invitation, of course, is to explore. Rupture is inevitable, repair is possible, and repair is optional, right? We are worth more, in the words of Brian Stevenson. If you don't know who he is, we will talk more, right? We are worth more than the worst things that we have ever done. And we are worth more than the worst things that have ever happened to us. You are worthy of repair and you matter. So with that said, I thank you for the privilege of your time and scene.
How was this for you folks? Did we get something from this? What were we writing down? Okay. I know there's lots of little nuggets in there. And of course, we're focusing on rupture is inevitable, repair is possible, repair is optional. Yes, choose wisely. But there is one, maybe two actually ideas that I did not go extensively into. And I just wanted to touch base on them post, right, that excerpt of that keynote speech. One of the ideas that I didn't really go into as much is the leaning in continuum, right? The ability to say, I'm leaning into this. How does one do that? That is going to be in the show notes. And there's also a discussion briefly around emotional sobriety and the stage of life, right? I am going to be focusing on that part, the emotional stage of life and the emotional sobriety bit in this month's Empowered Human Live. So if you were like, Nina, I want to show up for this, I want to explore this more, I want to bring my things to the table, the last Wednesday of the month, follow me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina to get access to knowledge about this and reminders about this, right? It's going to be on Instagram this month. Hey! And we are going to be recording it on Instagram so that you can check this out, but you want to show up live so that we can actually work through this. We are going to be working, again, the stage of life, that emotional sobriety metaphor that we use. So that's going to happen at the end of this month. I can explore more then. For the leaning in continuum, it is basically ways for you to explore leaning into your edge when it comes to your relationship with yourself, if there's been a rupture, or your relationship with someone else, if there's been a rupture. It's also very helpful if you have an identity that you have been hiding or masking. We are going to have some episodes this month on masking and how do we repair that rupture when we've been doing that for quite so long that, wow, we may not know who we are at our core, right? We may need to explore that. That leaning in continuum is going to take you into 5 ways that you can do that, starting with the most personal, which is just your relationship with you, to the most public, right? 1 to 5, the most public, which is if you are an advocate for this rupture, for this repair, for this identity piece. In no way, shape, or form, just so we're clear, do you have to get to 5. You just have to find where you feel most comfortable, most confident, most secure on that leaning in continuum. Okay. That is it. So I know I've given you a lot in this episode, to explore. I hope that you are leaning into those triggers. If you are feeling avoidant, if you are feeling like you want to pull away, if you are feeling cloudy or unsure, all of those are signs that some part of you says, I need to know how to address this. I need more tools. And I welcome you, friend. Let's continue these explorations, the personal work that it takes to do this, the courage that it takes to lean in this direction. I like to give adventure challenges. I know this episode was a little different than we typically do it, but I do like to give adventure challenges for the upcoming week. My invitation is for you to take anything that you wrote down and to figure out one line. I want you to commit one line into how you can further explore that facet of your human identity, you beautiful freaking human, okay? How can you explore that facet of your human identity? Is it rupture? Is it repair? Is it knowing that it's optional? You don't have to repair with every single person who has harmed you. You can just repair with yourself, right? It's optional. Also, everyone is not going to necessarily want to repair with you. How do you still repair with yourself? Okay. Those are just some of the topics you can talk about. Is it emotional sobriety? Is it, having that stage of life and you being in the spotlight so that what's at the center can ripple out? There's so many beautiful nuggets for us to explore this week. Again, my adventure challenge is explore what you and your humanity say. You know what? This is that thing. This is that thing I'm going to explore this upcoming week. Huh? And know that my thoughts are with you and that I am sending you energy quite genuinely from my empowered human heart to yours to do this work in a way that feels so beautifully vibrant to you. You so deserve this. You deserve it. You matter. So with that said, Thank you so much for being willing to explore your triggers as a human being. And if this exchange has been helpful, please share it with someone else. Get the dialogue going. If it's 5 stars, give us that review and specify it was this episode that did it for you. That's what helps other people say, oh, I get it. It's helpful. It's, it validates the work that we're doing here. And of course, the tools that we're trying to get to help people transform hard conversations into teachable moments. So, nothing further for me to say except stay curious.